So today's class is on a very fundamental question and issue that keeps coming up, which is the meaning of suffering. What's the Jewish philosophy on why people suffer? If you remember, this is one of the questions we asked in the beginning of the class 4 weeks ago when we were just discussing ideas that we want to cover, and we asked, why do good people suffer? Let's begin with reading in the overview, and we'll start with Layla. If you'd like to read the overview over here, it's on the screen. It's, if you're following in the book, it's on page 60. Elia, I believe you have the book, page 60. Layla, take it away.
Great Jews never complained about their fate. They trusted that everything that befell them was from above was good, whether hidden or revealed, good. Yet the same great Jewish leaders, seeing the pain of their flock, argued incessantly with God, "Why must your people suffer?" And indeed, most often God would save them from their troubles. Yet the meaning of suffering remains a mystery. Only one thing we know: God doesn't want us to understand. Perhaps if we understood, we would become complacent. He wants us to rage against darkness, to demand an era of harmony and revealed good. And he wants us to bring that time to heal this world by flooding it with light.
Thank you. So there's 3 beautiful points here that we mentioned. Number 1, the greatest Jews complained to God when something was a problem. People mistakenly believe that blind faith would mean never to question, never to want anything better, accept whatever happens to us because it's all good from God. There's a group of Christianity that believes that we should not go to doctors, because if God made someone sick, then apparently that person is supposed to be sick. And who are we to play God and try to heal the person? So Judaism says that we should be bothered when something bad happens to someone. But the next question is, even though we are trusting God, we should still question it at the same time. We know that it's good. We know that God is only looking to do good for us, but at the same time, we want it to be better. And another fundamental point is that the fact that we do not understand always why people suffer is not by mistake. It's not because somehow we couldn't get the memo or the answer correct. God intentionally hides it from us, that we should not know why people suffer. Because if we did, how much compassion can we have for everybody that is suffering? How much help would we provide if we believed that everything was for a reason and we knew the reason? We would say, well, apparently God knows this is best for you. Why would I get involved? Why would I help you? Why would I assist? So God wants us to build our character of care, kindness, and love for another. And he says, I don't want you to know all the answers. So you will still be pained and bothered when there isn't a perfect world. Let's continue on the next page. And Elia, if you'd like to read, page 61, the key points that we're going to be discussing in this class.
Number 1?
Yep. Yeah, read all of them, all 6.
Oh, okay. Questioning God's way comes from our faith in him, not a lack of it. 2. When things don't seem to go our way, it is helpful to remember everything God does is good. 3. Our misfortunes are actually blessings in disguise, since they originate in a higher world. 4. Suffering refines the body and lets the soul shine through. 5. When someone else is suffering, we shouldn't try to explain away their hardships. 6. When we see suffering, we should use our outrage to change the world. If we don't see God fixing it, we will.
Right. So these are key points. Each one of these contains an entire idea on their own, which we'll explain throughout the class in brief. Of course, this requires, if we want to discuss this in detail, many lectures, many classes. But we're going to go through these points briefly, and then at the end of the class, we'll come back to these key points in order to see the shift of our knowledge from before the class and after the class. Let's read, Stern, if you'd like to read the introduction.
Sure, but for some reason it's not coming up on the screen. Oh yeah, okay, I see it now. Okay.
I can make it also a little longer here.
Thanks. As Jews, we believe that God can do anything. We also believe that He is good and wants good for us. So why is there so much suffering? Why do innocent children lose their lives to illness every day? Why do good people around the world suffer under slavery, poverty, and starvation? Why do entire cities get wiped out by fire, by water, and by war? In a world formed and directed by an all-powerful, all-merciful God, why is there so much tragedy? Why must people suffer?
Correct. So let's start with the first thing is to point out on what is suffering. Look at this activity for a moment. We have here 3 people that have a haircut. They all look exactly the same, and yet the guy on the left, it's style. He chose to have that haircut. He thinks it looks beautiful. The guy in the middle is a soldier. He chose to sign up to the military and therefore required such a haircut willingly. The third one is a survivor of a sickness, an illness that caused him to lose his hair. You would look at a picture of someone without hair, you can look at it as suffering, or you can look at it as something that he chose on his own. This little boy, he can be screaming, he can be laughing, he can be crying. Not everything that appears to be suffering is actually suffering. There's a beautiful story which we'll read later on in this lecture, later on in this class, which really brings out that point. It drives it home. But that's just to put it in perspective. But let's start with point number 1. Point number 1 is, if someone bothered you and hurt you, especially if it was a loved one, do you say, well, if they hurt me, if they did something embarrassing, clearly they don't love me, and I will never speak to them again? Or do you scream at them from pain, saying, why did you do this to me? When you're screaming at someone from pain of what they've done to you, it doesn't show on a lack of a connection. It shows on a connection that is so strong, and therefore I expected better from you. I expected something that would actually show me that you care for me. We'll use an interesting story that I heard to bring out this example. There was a boy, we'll call him Jack. Jack was a really violent child. He was someone that always needed an extra pair of eyes to make sure he's behaving. Because if you weren't watching him, he could have been destroying the place. He was an extra dosage of energy. Jack's counselor always had to be careful to make sure that Jack's behaving. And whenever they went on a trip, he was focused on Jack. One time, they went to an arcade place, and all the children are playing with their arcades, with the machines. And the counselor notices Jack, he's looking at him, and he sees Jack is looking at another gentleman, not part of the camp, that was at the counter. This gentleman was taking out some money to buy a card with coins in order to use the machines. And by mistake, a $5 bill drops out of his pocket, falls on the floor. The counselor, before he gets a chance to do anything, sees Jack get up and start walking towards the counter. In his mind, he thinks right away, uh-oh, I know what Jack's about to do. This kid is going to snatch that money and take it for himself. As he's thinking this, there was another boy standing by the counter that noticed this $5 bill fall on the floor. He quietly bends down, takes the money, and sticks it into his pocket. So the counselor and Jack see another boy steal this money that an innocent patron dropped. The counselor's watching. Before he gets a chance to intervene, Jack walks over, takes out a $5 bill from his own pocket, drops it on the floor, taps the gentleman on the shoulder and says, I'm sorry, sir, but I believe you dropped $5 on the floor. The gentleman turns around, he sees his money, he says, oh, thank you very much, very kind of you. Takes his money, not knowing that there was actually another boy that stole his money and that Jack was putting out his own dollars in order for this person not to lose. The counselor sees this and he's completely shocked. He would never believe. The last kid to do this was Jack. Jack would be the kid that would take from everybody, so he assumed. And he went over to Jack and he said, I'm so surprised. I saw everything that happened. I saw that that person lost some money And not only were you going to go apparently to give it back, but when someone else stole it, you went ahead and gave him back the money. He said, where does that come from? What made you do such an act? So Jack says, I'll tell you. When I was younger, I used to visit my grandfather's store. He used to sell cigars. I would hang out there. And one day I'm in the store and a customer that was taking out some money dropped a dollar bill on the floor. A little boy that was there stood next to the counter thinking that no one saw, put his foot on the bill, waiting for this customer to leave so then he can steal the money. So he's standing on the bill, making as if it's just all natural. And he said, my grandfather noticed what this boy was doing. And as soon as the customer turned around to walk out of the store, my grandfather took a dollar bill out of the cash register, threw it over the counter on the floor, and called back the customer, said, excuse me, sir, you dropped a dollar bill. Customer came back, took the money, and walked out of the store. He said, this boy sat there completely ashamed. He thought that my grandfather didn't see what happened, but now he realized that not only my grandfather saw what happened, he gave his own money in order for this boy not to be able to steal. He said this boy felt completely shamed, and he said my grandfather didn't scream at him, he didn't embarrass him. He just said, from you, I expected better. And he said, that's it. He said, that little boy was me. When my grandfather showed me how a person should be behaving, and he didn't put me down, but he lifted me up, showed me how much he does expect from me because he has a relationship with me. He said, imagine my grandfather would scream at me in front of the customer. Say, what are you, a little thief? What are you, a rascal? What are you, a rat over here? Get out of here. I can't trust you around my store. Who knows what you're taking from me? That would be the end of me speaking to him, of me having relations with my family. I would say these are a bunch of obnoxious people, no sensitivity. He said, I did something wrong. But my grandfather handled it with such a respect, showing me that he just wanted better from me, that he assumed that I was a more honest person. That made me want to lift myself up and be the better person that I know I could be. That story shows on the difference of breaking a connection or strengthening a connection, even though there was a mishap. When we have a problem with what God did, we can either say, you know what? I'm upset at God. That's it. God, I'm not talking to you again. We're all done. Don't bother me. Don't call me. Don't ask me for anything. Don't demand anything. I am done with you because you treated me so badly. Or we can say, God, I so desire a connection with you, and that is more important to me than my questions of why I'm suffering. And when I suffer, I come and demand from you. I say, God, from you, I expected better. From you, I believe that I can get a better life, not in a way of, therefore, there's nothing to talk about. Therefore, no contact between me and you anymore. But therefore, I want an explanation. I want my life to be better. I want to have a good connection with you, not in a way where because we had a problem, we break ties, but the more we demand explanations means the more I care, the more I know we really have a connection. If someone in the street told you something rude, you wouldn't get as offended and as upset about it as if your parent told it to you. Because the guy in the street, you say, I don't know you. I don't care for you. And the fact that you have your issues, that's with your problem, I don't expect any better from you. And therefore, I'm just going to wipe that out of my memory. When it's a parent that does it to us, it's so painful because you're my parent. You should be giving me so much love, so much care. Now comes the question, why would you say such a thing to your child? Why would you do it to someone that you love? So the question we have to God is not, well, if I have a question, you don't exist. I know you exist, and I know that you care for me so much. Why would you make me suffer? Why would you give me such a hardship? The proof is that we find this with the greatest people in Jewish history asking this question. Let's pull up over here on the screen. And who can give me an idea? Who are these three people? I'll give you a hint. They're from the greatest Jewish leaders throughout time. Anybody have an idea? The easiest one is the one in the middle. Yeah, Layla?
Well, I mean, I think the left is Abraham.
Very good. Avram sacrificing his son on the altar. Correct, yeah.
Yeah, middle Moses.
Very
And then
good.
David.
Yeah, really good. Very good. You got all three right. These are three of the greatest Jewish leaders. And what they all have in common is that they explicitly asked God, demanded, requested, why do good people suffer? Can you imagine the greatest leaders of the Jewish people didn't say, of course good people suffer, because God knows everything, and God is the ultimate good, and we should never doubt him. How dare you ask a question on God? The greatest leaders are the ones that demanded, and it's written in God's Torah, which means God chose the verses in his Torah to write down when they ask God, why do good people suffer? Because it shows on our strong connection, not on our lack of connection. If there was no God, I wouldn't care why good people suffer. What do you mean, why do good people suffer? Because go to the doctor, ask to make an autopsy, and the doctor will say this person had a heart failure. So you say, but why did they have a heart failure? They were such a good person. Since when do heart failures only attack bad people? If it's a medical condition, it's natural. You had high cholesterol, you had other issues with your body, you had a heart attack. It doesn't care if you're good or bad. It doesn't care if it's the day of your wedding or if you're a mother of 6 kids. Disease, illness, accidents happen because it's nature. You cannot ask a question by definition, why, if you do not believe that God exists. Because what do you mean, why? It just, accidents happen. It can happen to anyone. It can happen to a young bride that's about to get married today. But if you believe in God, then you have a question. This doesn't make sense to me. Why did it happen? It doesn't take away my faith. It's because of my faith that I have this question, which we'll get into answers later. But just as a preface to this whole class is, number one, asking the question doesn't mean it's a problem. Let's look at one of the verses in the Torah, which explicitly we have Moses asking this question. And Sheila, if you'd like to read it, it's from Exodus chapter 5, verse 22 and 23. This, just to give you a little background, what's going on. You're on mute, but let me give you a background a second. Moses was sent by God. God said, go tell Pharaoh to let the people go. Moses comes to Pharaoh, and he's assuming miracles will happen, and boom, the Jews will be free. Everybody will be happy. And not only are the Jews not freed right away, but Pharaoh says, you apparently have too much time to think about freedom. You're not working hard enough if you can even imagine about leaving Egypt. I'm going to make your work even harder. I used to give you materials in order to make bricks. From now on, you got to figure out those materials by yourself. You go collect it. I'm not giving you any more too much extra time so you can have imaginations about going free. So Moses is upset. He said, God, you sent me to the Jewish people to free them. Not only did you not make it better, you actually made it worse. Literally, Pharaoh now made the Jewish people's work harder. So he comes demanding from God, where is your justice? And Sheila, if you'd like to read these verses. You have to unmute yourself. Yeah, perfect.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Oh. Then Moses returned to the Lord and said, O Lord, why did you bring harm upon this nation? Why did you send me? Ever since I came to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has dealt worse with this nation, and still you have not delivered your people.
Yeah. And now we'll bring down, there's an entire book in the Torah from the Tanakh, the 24 books. There's an entire book explicitly about this topic. It's a book called in English Job. In Hebrew, it's Iyov. It discusses why do good people suffer. This was a man that had a great life, and all of a sudden he started suffering. And the entire book is him discussing with his friends, why does God do that to him? So Layla, if you'd like to read, this is just an excerpt of 2 of the verses from that book.
I will say to God, do not condemn me. Let me know why you quarrel with me. Is it good to you that you should oppress, that you should reject the toil of your hands and shine upon the counsel of the wicked?
So Job is demanding from God, why do you shine upon the counsel of the wicked? Why do you help the wicked and do not allow the good people to prosper? Where is your justice? So God writes this in his Torah because this is something that he wants us to deal with, something to question. Let's pull up over here. This is a picture of a baby, as you can all see. This word, the words on the left is the mother saying. Imagine a mother says to the baby, "What's wrong with you? Can't you remember your table manners?" What would you tell such a mother that's demanding from the baby to eat not like this? Elia, do you think the mother's right?
No, because the baby probably hasn't learned table manners.
Exactly. You don't demand table manners from someone that you don't expect it from. Who do you demand table manners from? An adult. Someone that's mature, someone that you know could do better, you demand that from. So too, when we demand from God justice, it's because we know that God could do better. We say, we know that you're right. We know that you're fair. We have such a strong belief, more than our question, is the knowledge that you are always going to do the right thing. And therefore we have the question. Yeah, and read this. Steini, are you with us, or can you see the screen?
Yeah.
Okay, so read that.
The
The very fact.
very fact that we ask why is proof that we have high expectations from God. We believe that God is merciful and can do anything.
Correct. Here's a fascinating excerpt from an article of Elie Wiesel. Elie Wiesel was a Holocaust survivor, which in the beginning of his times, I think someone has, oh, there we go. No, it's someone that went through hardships of the Holocaust, and in the beginning, he wrote a lot against God, against his belief in God. But later on in his life, he came back around to say, you know, God, I realize the reason why it bothers me so much is because I want a connection with you. And I know that we're really in love. And therefore, it hurts me so much to see the destruction that you did during the Holocaust. Here's an article that he wrote. We'll have Sheila, if you'd like to read.
Master of the universe, in my testimony, I have written harsh words, burning words about your role in our tragedy. I would not repeat them today, but I felt that I felt them in every cell of my being. Why did you allow, if not enable the killer, day after day, night after night, to torment, kill, and annihilate tens of thousands of Jewish children? Why were they abandoned by your creation? These thoughts were in no way destined to diminish the guilt of the guilty. Their established culpability is irrelevant to my problem. With you, Master of the universe, in my childhood, I did not expect much from human beings, but I expect everything from you. I expected everything.
Yeah. What does he mean, I expected everything from you? He means to say, from God, the one that I know is fair, why in the world would you do such a thing? It doesn't make sense. It's like there was a guy that came to a rabbi and he said, Rabbi, how is it that the Holocaust could have happened? How could you still believe in God after the Holocaust? So he said, on the contrary, my question is, after seeing the destruction that man did, I ask, how can we believe anymore in man? We can only believe now in God. Man, we know, can do bad. God, we know, is good. And therefore comes our question, why would God give us such suffering? To man, we don't ask, why do you, no one goes to Hitler and say, why would you do such bad? We say, because he was nuts in the head. He was crazy. He had issues. With God, we say, we know, God, you don't have issues. We know you make sense. And therefore, I have the question to you. So it's not to take away blame from those that did something bad, but it's to say, from God, we know things should be right, and therefore it's so hurtful when it's not right. It's so bothersome. As here, just a short clip of tragedies that sometimes God can do. So you have here a guy that's clinging, trying to last, to stay on for his life. Tsunamis that kill hundreds of thousands of people. If we didn't believe God was merciful, so when a tsunami wipes out, we have explanations. The plates of the earth move, and therefore tsunamis happen. There's no question. But when we see a tragedy, coronavirus, someone dying, some tragedy happening to a synagogue, we're all bothered by the question, just like the greatest sages were, because we have such strong connection and expectations from God that therefore it bothers us. Why is it this way? Let's have Leela, if you'd like to read over here.
Our outrage, our incessant challenge to God over what has occurred, this itself is a most powerful attestation to our belief in him and our faith in his goodness. Because if we did not, underneath it all, possess this faith, what is it that we are outraged at? The blind workings of fate, the random arrangement of quarks that make up the universe? It is only because we believe in God. Because we are convinced that there is right and there is wrong, and that right must and ultimately will triumph, that we cry out, as Moses did, "Why, my God, have you done evil to your people?"
Very good. So this is bringing out the same point, and the letter continues. Let's read it over here on this page. Continue. You read the first paragraph. Now continue. It turns out.
Me?
Yeah,
Okay.
continue.
It turns out that demanding explanations from God is a very Jewish thing to do. It's a part of our relationship with him, which indicates how much we believe in his almighty power and limitless compassion. And sure enough, when Moses and other Jewish leaders cried out to God for compassion, most often God listened to them. As the rabbinic saying goes, a tzaddik decrees and God fulfills his decree. God decrees and a tzaddik annuls his decree. But do any of these conversations with God end with an explanation for suffering? In the following section of this lesson, we will explore several approaches to the question of suffering. Our next section features sages of the Talmudic times and how they reacted when they found themselves in trouble.
Okay. So we just started off now with the question is not a problem. And now let's start looking into answers. Of course, we have some answers. Number one, we'll start with that everything is really for the good. Not every time can we see the real good in every detail because we have a very superficial sight of everything that happens in the world. But if we were able to see a little bit different, if we were able to see a little bit deeper, we would be able to see the true good that you have in everything. Imagine, for example, someone that is really sick. They never heard of a doctor. We mentioned this before. And they end up in the ICU and they have a surgeon that's dealing with them and giving them surgery. This person might think that this person is a murderer. If they wake up and see someone with a mask over them with a knife and there's blood on their body, they would flip out and say this person is dangerous. But that's because they do not see the full picture. If they realize that it's Mr. X, it's our doctor that's dealing with him, they would be able to appreciate that just because it assumes, because you have a lack of knowledge that it's bad, doesn't mean that it's actually bad. Let's look over here. You have this video bringing out this point.
Imagine a primitive fellow born and raised in a deep, dark jungle far, far away from any hint of civilization. He knows nothing about the modern technology. He knows nothing of modern medicine. One day while hunting for food, he trips over a rock and smashes his head against a tree. When he opens his eyes, he finds himself lying on a table with blinding lights beating down on him, surrounded by people wearing green robes. He then sees the sharp weapons in their hands and immediately realizes that he has been captured by a tribe of cannibals who are about to devour him for dinner. He panics and frantically wants to break free. Now imagine someone tries to explain to him, these are not cannibals, but doctors. They're not trying to hurt you, but heal you. These complete strangers have just spent 23 hours tirelessly and passionately trying to save your life. Coming from his frame of reference, is it at all possible that he could even fathom that absolute strangers would care so much and work so hard to save his life? Trying to understand the ways of God during tragic times is as ludicrous as thinking this fellow could understand that these obviously cruel cannibals actually want to save his life rather than take it. God never wants to hurt us, but only wants to heal us. Yes, sometimes it hurts to be healed, but even the pain itself is part of God's compassionate healing. When life gets rough, ask not why this is happening to me, but what this happening is asking of me. In every painful situation, choose to find opportunities for growth and humbly reserve judgment of the mastermind of the universe.
So there's a fascinating story the Talmud tells us of a man that his name was Nahum. They called him Ish Gamzu, which means the man that always says Gamzu letova. This too is for the good. Because anything that happened to him, he always says, great, I am so happy that this happened to me, even if it was the most tragic thing ever. He was once sent on a mission where he had to bring a gift to the Roman emperor, and by mistake, or not by mistake, but some thieves switched it with dirt. He came to the Roman emperor with dirt, and the Roman emperor said, I'm going to kill you because you're making a fool out of me. You're giving me a gift of dirt. A miracle, he said, this too is for the good. He never doubted God's help in his situation, and he knew that whatever God does is for the good. Turns out, God made a miracle happen to him, and Elijah the prophet came dressed up as a minister and tells the king, the Roman emperor, maybe this dirt is a special miraculous dirt like Abraham had. When Abraham fought against the kings described in the book of Genesis, our sages tell us that he took dirt, threw it, and it turned into spears, swords, daggers, and he was able to wipe out his enemies. So he said, maybe the Jews gave you a gift of this special dirt that is miraculous. The Roman emperor tried it out, and sure enough, it won him the battle that he was fighting against another country for many years, wasn't able to succeed. And because of that, he annulled the decree against the Jewish people, which this rabbi was coming to give a gift for. Turns out that this gift truly was better than giving him gold and silver. Let's read. This is just a short part of the beginning of the story. And Layla, if you'd like to read the story.
Sure. And why did they call him Nahum of Gamzu? The reason is that, with regard to any matter that occurred to him, he would say, this too is for the good, Gamzu Tovah. Once the Jews wished to send a gift to the house of the emperor. They said, who should go and present this gift? Let Nahum of Gamzu go, as he is accustomed to miracles. They sent with him a chest full of jewels and pearls, and he went and spent the night in a certain inn. During the night, these residents of the inn arose and took all of the precious jewels and pearls from the chest and filled it with earth. The next day, when he saw what had happened, Nahum of Gamzu said, this too is for the good.
Yeah. And sure enough, it turns out it was for the good. This is a little bit of an entertaining aspect to it. Hopefully we'll have enough time, but let's play this. This is a guy that's a rapper, and he sings this song. In this story, he does it in a rap.
Nahum Ish Gamzu, he knew that no matter what happened to him, this too was truly just for the very best. And one day his theory got put to the test. See, the Jewish people were being oppressed by the Romans, so they sent Caesar a chest that was full of precious pearls and stones, just hoping that the Romans would leave them alone. They chose to send Nahum Ish Gamzu, who miracles tended to happen to. So he picked up the chest and journeyed all day till he came to the inn where he wanted to stay. Now the residents of the town he was in, they asked about this box that he had with him. So he told them he had been sent to bring a gift from the Jews to the Roman king. But it happened that night while Nahum slept, the residents of the town opened up his chest. They stole all the pearls and gems they found and filled it back up with dust off the ground. Well, sometimes life is full of strife, nothing goes your way. It seems like all your trouble and problems double every single day. But when you're in distress, have no doubt this too, Gamzula Tova is for the best, although you might not find out till the story's over. When Achamish Gamzu woke up the next day, picked up his chest and went on his way, continuing with his mission to bring his gift from the Jews to the Roman king. But it happened when he finally arrived at the Caesar's palace and came inside. The Romans opened the chest, and thus Caesar saw it was filled with a bunch of dust. Enraged, he said, "Now I see. It must be that your people are mocking me. For this insult, I'm going to kill every Jew, beginning with you, Nachum Ish Gamzu." But even as he was led outside to die, not once did Nachum complain or cry. Even though it appeared that his life was over, all he had to say was Gamzu Lato, because sometimes life is full of strife, nothing goes your way. Seems like all your trouble and problems double every single day. But when you're in distress, have no doubt this too, Gamzu Latova is for the best, although you might not find out till the story's over. Well, Eliyahu Hanavi, he appeared in disguise. He spoke into Caesar's ear. He said, "The Jews aren't stupid. Why would they do something so foolish as to anger you? Perhaps this dust is special. It must be just like Abraham Avinu's dust. For I heard about dust that he used for wars, and when he threw it at his enemies, it turned into swords." So the Romans tested the dust, and sure enough, they found out it was no regular stuff, for there had been an area that they just couldn't beat, but when they used this dust, they were able to defeat. After that, the Caesar set Nahum free inside the treasure vault, saying, "Take what you please." So he picked up as much as his chest could hold, went home with a load full of solid gold. And on his way back, he returned to that inn in the town where the people had stolen from him. And when they saw all the gold, they said, "What did you bring to receive such a great reward from the king?" So he told them the truth. He said, "I swear what I took from here is just what I brought there." So the residents figured they'd do the same, picked up as much dust as they could and came. They brought their gift to the Caesar too, trying to be like Nahum Ish Gamzu. But the dust they brought didn't do a thing, so they got put to death for insulting the king. Sometimes life is full of strife and nothing goes your way. Seems like all your trouble and problems double every single day. But when you're in distress, have no doubt this too, Gamzu Latova. It's for the best, although you might not find out till the story's over.
So here we have the story we just explained about how everything is ultimately for the good. Sometimes it appears to be bad, but really it's for the good. Fascinating story that Talmud also tells us regarding Rabbi Akiva. I'll tell it to you outside. He was traveling on the way. He had with him a donkey, a rooster, and a candle. He comes to a city, asks us if he can stay. They say, "Sorry, we don't accept guests here." He's forced to sleep out in the middle of the field. And to add to his tragedy, animals come and take away his donkey. An animal comes, a lion comes and kills his donkey. Another cat comes and kills his rooster. And then a wind comes and blows out his candle. And he doesn't say, "Oh, this is such a bad day. This is terrible. Where's God?" He says, "You know what? Whatever God does is for the good." Sure enough, that night, bandits, an army came and conquered over this city and took everyone captive. If he would have been able to sleep in that city, he would have been captive too. If he would have had his animals with him in the field, he would have been making noise. The lion, his donkey, his rooster would make noise. The candle they would see, and they would capture him as well. Because he didn't have all his items with him, he was able to stay silent and quiet, and he was able to be saved. So everything that happens to us is for the good. Sometimes we see the good right now, and sometimes it's going to be good that comes later. As an example, a guy buys his son a horse, and everybody is so proud and so happy for him. Wow, look how lucky he is, he gets a horse. But then 2 days later, he falls off the horse because the horse was running too fast and he breaks his leg. Everybody says, "Oh, it's so sad, he had a horse and he broke his leg." And then 2 days later, there's a draft for the military, and they're taking all kids that are healthy and good, and this kid has a broken leg, so he gets exempt from the draft. So it turns out it was good that he got a horse. So back and forth throughout our life, we see a very limited picture. God sees the entire perspective from a bird's eye view of thousands of years, so he knows exactly what is happening, why it's happening. But let's take this even a step further. Let's go to step C. Till now, we said it's good to have a question, and sometimes bad things happen for a good reason. Step C takes it even further. Nothing bad falls from heaven. Not only do bad things happen for a good that's going to come later, but even the bad itself that's happening right now, it appears to be bad, but there is nothing that's bad that comes from heaven. We just don't see it because we do not have the capability of seeing a greater light that comes down to this world looking as bad, but is really good. Not that it's bad, but it's going to bring good later, but it itself is good. Let's take this for example. Let's pull up our next slide over here. What animals are these? Elia, do you know what animals on the top left?
Oh, like lizard?
Close. I also thought it looks like a lizard. This is actually a mouse.
Oh, ew.
An X-ray of a mouse, right? You have here a mouse, a dog, a bull, a fish. How come we don't see this when we look at the animal? We don't see it because the lights from the X-ray are too bright for us to see. They're not a physical light that our eyes can use and can appreciate. You need to have special equipment in order to experience it. If you think of it as the ultraviolet light, the UV lights, which is like, I think they call it the black light, that is light also that you cannot see with the naked eye. There's certain things in the room that only if you shut off the lights and turn on this special light can you see it. So too, God has blessings that he wants to give to us that we cannot experience in our physical bodies, that we appreciate it as a gift, but we know, trusting God, that it is for the good. As we see in the next slide, the Torah tells us to thank God for whatever happens, even when it does not seem good. We should thank God because ultimately everything is for the good, meaning it itself is good. Let's read over here a quote from the Talmud. Elia, if you'd like to read just as. Page 73.
Just as one recites a blessing for his good fortune, blessed are you, God, who is good and does good, so must he recite a blessing for misfortune. As it says, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. Deuteronomy 6:5. With all your heart, with your two impulses, the evil impulse as well as the good impulse.
Right, and he doesn't finish explaining the rest of the sentence, but the Talmud continues, with all your might means with anything that God gives you, you should thank him, because everything is really for the good. We just cannot see it that way. Let's look over here on our next source. And Sheila, if you'd like to read over here, the Gemara.
Number 7?
Yeah.
No. The Gemara explains that this does not mean that he recites the same blessings. For the blessing in a case of misfortune, God forbid, is blessed are you, God, the true judge. Rather, the implication is that one should accept misfortune with joy, like the joy in a visible and obvious good. For it too is for the good, except that it is not apparent and visible to mortal eyes, for it stems from the hidden spiritual world, which is higher than the revealed spiritual world, whence derives an apparent and revealed good.
So everything is good, just some appear and some don't appear to be good. And Stani, if you'd like to read source 8, the truth.
Sure. The truth is, however, that nothing bad falls from above and everything is good, though it is not apprehended because of its immense and abundant goodness.
So sometimes the hidden good appears to be negative or uncomfortable, but it's actually because it's from a higher source, meaning X-rays is a higher light than the regular light that we use, so too the good that comes down and appearing to be bad is actually from a higher source, and therefore we cannot appreciate it while we're living in a physical body. So if we only are operating on a materialistic level, then it's devastating when we perceive a blow in this world in an open way. But if we tune into the spirituality, something that's greater than ourselves, then we can readjust our priorities and accept, even though it is not the reality that we asked for, we can understand that this is like a springboard to connect to God on a higher level. God's demanding from us to not just be on a simplistic level, but rather on a greater level connected to him. As we'll pull up in the slide over here, all that comes from above is good. Not just for the good, which is like we said in point B, but it's truly good, just we cannot perceive it that way. Let's read over here the story. This is a story I mentioned to you earlier. And Layla, if you'd like to read.
Story perspective. A man once came to Rabbi Dov Ber, the famed Maggid of Mezari.
Yeah, that's the city where he grew up, but yeah, that's just the name he was referred to as.
Okay, with a question. The Talmud tells us a person is supposed to bless God for the bad just as he blesses him for the good, said the man. How is this humanly possible? Had our sages said that one must accept without complaint or bitterness whatever is ordained from heaven? This I can understand. I can even accept that ultimately everything is for the good, and that we are to bless and thank God also for the seemingly negative developments in our lives. But how can a human being possibly react to what he experiences as bad in exactly the same way he responds to what he experiences as good? How can a person be grateful for his troubles as he is for his joys? Rabbi Dober replied, to find an answer to your question, you must go see my disciple, Reb Zusha of Anipoli. Only he can help you with in this matter.
Okay, continue.
The man traveled to the home of Reb Zusha, who received his guest warmly. The visitor decided to observe Reb Zusha's conduct before posing his question. Before long, he concluded that his host truly exemplified the Talmudic dictum, which so puzzled him. He couldn't think of anyone who suffered more hardship in his life than his poverty-stricken host. There was never enough to eat in Reb Zusha's home, and his family was beset with all sorts of afflictions and illnesses. Yet Reb Zusha was always good-humored and cheerful, and constantly expressing his gratitude to the Almighty for all his kindness. But what was his secret? How did he do it? The visitor finally decided to pose his question. I wish to ask you something, and in fact, this is the purpose of my visit to you. Our Rebbe advised me that you can provide me with the answer. He said to Reb Zusha, what is your question? The visitor repeated that he had asked what he had asked of the Maggid. You raise a good point, said Reb Zusha, after thinking the matter through. But why did our Rebbe send you to me? How would I know? He should have sent you to someone who has experienced suffering.
So what do you see in this story, Layla? This guy clearly was suffering, and yet
yeah, so like Reb Zusha, his perspective is just really good because he doesn't see his life as suffering. So it's all about your perspective.
100%. So this is showing us one of the ways that a person can say everything God gives is completely good. Suffering is a state of mind. It's not in our life. If someone never had a car, they're not suffering if they don't have a car. But when they have a car and all of a sudden the car breaks down, they feel like they're suffering. Well, why are you suffering? Because you had an expectation that your life needs to be with a car. And as soon as you don't have the car, you say, this is terrible. Who took the right to take away my car? Who had the audacity to remove something from me that I need? If we had a focus as in life, whenever something is taken away from me, I say, wow, look how long I had that car for. I could have never had a car, and I had it for 6 months without a problem. I am so grateful for that. If we switch to saying, being grateful for what we did have, rather than demanding what we need to have, that switches our focus of what is actually good in our lives. This guy says, I could have been so much worse off, and I'm so happy with all the blessings I have. He never once mentioned what it is that he doesn't have. He always said, look what I could have not have, and I do have. Shtani, were you raising? Was that?
Yeah, I have a question. What's the line where we, like, Maisha say, like, why, Hashem, did you do bad to the nation versus when we just accept and say it's good?
Very good question. And we're going to get to that in a moment, but I'll answer that now. The difference would be what we tell ourselves or what we tell others. When it comes to ourselves, we're giving ourselves a gift by learning how to accept what God does to us for the good, seeing the beauty in it and saying, wow, there must be something great here. Not just it will lead to something good, but it itself is good. How is it? I don't know, but I have so much trust in God that I know that this is good. That will allow us to go through life happily. All misery, all letdowns come from I had expectations of what I should be having and I didn't have it, and therefore I'm upset. If a person understands whatever happens to me is always for the good, that is the success of a person's life, to be happy. Will make friends want to be around them, will make their situation be amazing, they'll have a great relationship with their spouse, because everything that happens, clearly this is what God wanted. I thought I was going to have a car that doesn't run into issues, but clearly God wanted me to have a car that does have issues, and that's amazing. There's something special that God knows only I can do with this issue. When it comes to someone else's suffering, if you notice, when it comes to Abraham, Moses, David, they're constantly asking God, why is it that they're suffering in the world when someone else is having a problem? And even for ourselves, we could ask God that we want it to be better, but not in a way of saying, therefore there is no purpose with what I'm having. This is a complete mistake. This is a complete mismanagement. God, you have to get yourself back under control and find out who's making problems and issues in your company. When it comes to ourselves, we can say the best way to live is simultaneously both options. Like you said, to ourselves, I say this is the best for me and God is only good. And yet God wants me to ask that it should be even revealed good. God wants me to show that I have such a strong connection with him, and I demand that it should be even better. When it comes to someone else's suffering, then my job is to say, I demand that it should be better. Our job is never to come and start justifying and explaining to people. God never hired either one of us as his lawyers. If someone went through a tragedy, come and be there in silence and say, I'm with you in this. How could I help? Never to say, well, apparently God wants that person to be poor and hungry. I'm not going to give them food because let me explain to them the beauty of being hungry. It's like the joke they say of a woman in Beverly Hills that's extremely wealthy. And she comes out one day of her home. She's oblivious to the struggles of life that others go through. She comes out of her home one day and a poor man comes over to her crying, begging, say, please, ma'am, I haven't eaten in 3 days. Do you have maybe something to spare? She says, wow, such willpower. How do you do that? I'm always trying to stop myself from eating so much. Tell me, teach me. How do you stop yourself from eating and keeping such a healthy diet? That's where we're oblivious to other people's suffering, thinking all just about ourselves. We should be able to question God and say we want it to be better for someone else and even for ourselves, as long as it doesn't ruin our way of living right now, to continue in the task that we have on hand, but yet demand that it should be even revealed good. Moving on to an additional point, not just like we said before, it's good to question. Point number 2 was that it's ultimately going to lead to good. Point number 3 was that it itself is good, but actually suffering refines us. Suffering makes us a better person. If we were to have, you have a picture of a lighter here. If you have wax on a needle and you're trying to get it off, you could sit there scraping it and it might come off, but if you take a lighter and melt it off, it comes off really quick. It had to heat up in order for that to happen. but ultimately it's going to do the job. Everything that comes from above is for a purpose of bringing us to new heights that we haven't reached before. If you have a rubber band, think of it how a rubber band works. Let me pull up the slide. We'll start with this picture first, and then we'll get to the rubber band. Elia, what do all these people have in common with suffering? At the top left is acupuncture needles.
Oh, okay. I was wondering about that. They're all suffering for a good reason, like to get somewhere, kind of.
Yeah. The strings on the violin are really suffering and being choked. They're being pulled really, really hard, but that allows them to play the music. The guy is jogging, that allows him to be a healthier person. The soldiers train extremely difficultly, but that allows them to survive when they're in the battlefield. An acupuncture needle allows us to have a better flow of the blood in our body. So not every pain is there for no purpose. It's not as punishment, but it's there to allow us to go to new heights. Sometimes we appreciate and we're thankful when something bad happens because it allows us to re-question our lives and say, you know what, actually, I could be living a better life. I could be living a life more meaningful. Let's pull up this next.
Watch out! Rubber bands may be small and nasty, but they contain a big, sweet lesson. Watch again, in slow motion. First, I pulled the band back, then back a little further. Then, when it's just about ready to snap, that's when I let go. Now look at this. According to how far I pull back, that's how far forward it flies. So think of one of those lousy setbacks in life. You were pushing your way forward, and then something pulls you back to the point that you're ready to snap. But setbacks, like everything in this world, are designed to move you forward, not backward. Especially setbacks. You've just got to use it outright. And that setback can get you further ahead in life than you ever imagined. And the further you were pulled back, whoops, well, just another setback.
I want to show you here a video of this woman. She's a Chabad woman. Her husband has ALS for many years now. Most people that have ALS, where the body basically just stops functioning, slowly but surely everything shuts down and the person cannot function at all. Most people die within months to a year. He had so much care, so much help that he survived. He's already in bed, and of course they have met whatever they could do to help this person, but there's no cure for it. He's been many years this way. And she spoke about the challenges and struggle of living with a husband that literally starts dying in front of you, where it takes months, or in his case, years, where now the only thing he can do is with his eyes, he can move it. He cannot move anything else in his body. He could just move his eyes and use a screen in order where he puts his eyes on certain letters of the screen and the screen detects it and writes up a message based on that. So listen to her speak. It's nice to hear from someone that actually is going through a challenge or a setback.
We all go through cycles of ups and downs. When I look at it like a wheel. When we're on top of the wheel, everything is good. It's like a bird that's gliding in the wind. The bottom is a scary place. I call it a pit. When I get there, I'm in the pit. It's dark, it's scary, and you don't know how you're going to get out of it. I learned that this pit is a very useful place. This is where you learn things. This is where Hashem shows you what you're made of. And every time you're there, it's going to take a new skill to get out, because Hashem wants you to learn things and to learn more things and to learn more things. And the learning process changes you. We're not meant to be the person we were when we were born. we're meant to be greater and greater and stronger and stronger. And the thing is, being strong never feels like being strong. Being strong feels like you are about to fall apart, but you keep doing what you're supposed to do.
I think that last point is beautiful. Being strong is not, you feel you're amazing and everything is going great. Being strong is when you're about to feel like you're ripping, you're about to fall apart and explode, and yet you push forward and you go ahead. That's exactly where the growth is. That's where you become the better person. How many times do people say, well, my life is just doomed because of X, Y, and Z? We'll blame it on our parents, we'll blame it on our childhood, our teacher. We'll have some reason, and they're all valid and good. No one's denying that. But what we are saying is, if you did go through that challenge, God is saying there's so much more that you can do. I'm pulling you back so much further than everybody else because you can fly so much higher. Your wheel is so big and it can reach such heights, and therefore it can also go so low. But the lower you're going, it's because there's more growth that you can do. We'll read it over here in this source. Sharon, if you'd like to read Rabbi Shimon.
Yeah, sure. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish said, just as salt sweetens the taste of the meat and renders it edible, so too with regard to suffering. The suffering cleanses a person's transgressions, purifying him for a more sublime existence.
So every aspect in life that's good is going to come through hard work. If something is coming too easy, you might want to run away from it because it's probably not the right thing. Let's pull up over here our next slide. Imagine we're going on to point number E. Let's first read it in here. And Sheila, if you'd like to read E, when it's better not to know.
Our compassion makes us human. If we knew the real answer to suffering, would we lose that intrinsic part of ourselves? Would we stop seeking justice, empathy, and give up the fight to make a difference?
So now we're getting into the last point, which is why, if everything makes sense and it's all for the good, why can't God just make it simple and show us how he's training us? No one comes into a school, grabs a kid, tortures him, and then at the end of 2 years says, oh, actually, I wasn't torturing you. I was training you for the military. We tell them, please come sign up for the military. Why can't God tell us, guys, I have such good news for you. Here's the mission. Here's the plan. Starting today, you're going to finish it in 2 years. All your struggles are going to go away. Why can't God make it easy, explainable, motivational for us where we want to do this? We see how we're becoming stronger, getting greater people. Because we would lose our compassion for others if we had the answers to everything. Let's look at this video here. It's actually appropriate for this time because this is, we'll see in a moment. This is just the interviewer, but we'll see Jonathan Sacks, Rabbi, Lord Jonathan Sacks. He was the chief rabbi of the UK years ago, and he just passed away about 2 weeks ago. So this is someone asking him a question. Let's follow along.
A beautiful quote. No, you just did. I started off telling you about my parents, and it just comes to mind. I remember my father said to us that the last time he saw you, you remembered my mother had asked you a question, why do bad things happen to good people? And you said to my father, tell your wife, I still don't have an answer for her. I was wondering if you had any more insight.
Yes, I do, actually.
Oh.
God does not want us to understand why bad things happen to good people. Because if we ever understood, we would be forced to accept that bad things happen to good people. And God does not want us to accept those bad things. He wants us not to understand so that we will fight against the bad and the injustices of this world. And that is why there is no answer to that question, because God has arranged that we shall never have an answer to it.
So powerful words. It's intentional that we don't have the answer, so we will really care. If you put these glasses on, imagine your vision would extend past human limitations. And you'd be able to see God's perspective, and you would know the answer to all the problems in the world. How many of you want to wear these glasses? It might sound intriguing, exciting, entertaining. It would make us feel better than other people because we're more intelligent. But how much of the human feeling would that take away from our lives if we would know the answer to everything? Would we really be able to care for someone else, be pained by someone else's problem, be joyous when someone is happy about a positive occasion that happened in their life? If we know of everything that's going to happen and why it happens, and we'll know that not every happy occasion will last, we wouldn't be able to have that compassion, that care, the kindness that God is so working on getting us to be there for someone else, to put ourselves aside, to be able to assist and lovingly care for another person. That would not exist if we had answers to everything. How would you feel around other people that don't wear these glasses if you had these glasses? You would feel a little bit superior, a little bit non-caring. You would sort of treat them like adults treat children, or maybe zookeepers would treat animals. Not every time does understanding the pain make it easier to swallow. If we could understand, yes, it would help. But bottom line, it would also make it more difficult for the person to truly live their lives in the way that they were supposed to if they had all the explanations. And at a certain point, or I guess Sheila, if you'd like to read this.
At a certain point, we have to acknowledge that there are some parts of human suffering that are just not explainable.
Not every time do we need an explanation, and it doesn't diminish our understanding. On the contrary, it shows what God truly wants from us. And I think this is a beautiful quote from the Talmud, where I think if it would be enacted in more homes of Shiva, it would really help. And Lila, if you'd like to read this.
One is rewarded for silence in the house of mourning.
In a house of mourning, someone's going through a loss. How many times do people think it's their job to justify God, to be the philosopher that has all the explanations? If someone asks you, can you please explain to me this? Can you discuss it? Yes, we just went through many reasons and understandings about why bad things happen for ultimately a good purpose, or they themselves are good, allows us to grow. And if something does happen and the person wants the guidance or they want the answers for themselves, they can study. But for someone else to mix in and start giving these answers shows on a lack of care. It shows that it doesn't really bother you. It shows that you're a little bit feeling yourself above and beyond this other person, which is not what God wants. God wants us to feel a part of him, to feel that we're all in this together, wanting to take care of one another, and therefore not every question has an answer, and that's intentional. Not because there is no answer, but because it would defeat the purpose if there was an answer. As there was once a rabbi that survived the Holocaust, and someone asked him, your entire family was wiped out. How is it that you can still believe in God with all these sufferings that happen, with all these issues, with all this tragedy? Don't you say, God, what's the explanation? And the rabbi responded brilliantly. He said, if I really want, and I tell God I need to know the answer, God will say, no problem. Come up here to heaven. We'll finish with your life, and I'll explain you everything. I'll give you all the reasons, all the understanding. You won't doubt anything. But he said, I rather choose to live in this world with the questions than to live in the next world with all the answers. We can choose to have all the answers, but then we wouldn't be able to experience this world. God wants us in this world where there are questions, there are challenges, and then to see how we behave. That is the true success. And Elia, if you'd like to read over here.
We must reject all theological explanations for the Holocaust. What greater conceit and what greater heartlessness can there be than to give a reason? I'm making it bigger. To give a reason for the death and torture of millions of innocent men, women, and children. Can we presume to assume that an explanation enough to fit inside the finite bounds of human reason can explain a horror of such magnitude? We can only concede that there are things that lie beyond the finite ken of the human mind. It is not my task to justify God on this. Only God himself can answer for what he allowed to happen. And the only answer we will accept is the immediate and complete redemption that will forever banish evil from the face of the earth and bring to light the intrinsic goodness and perfection of God's creation.
So God alone is the one that has the answer, and it's not our job to figure it out. It's heartless, as it says here. This is from the Rebbe, heartless for us to give explanations. That's not our job, and that is not showing compassion. God never hired us to do that. He wants us to demand that it should be better. And if we notice, we'll continue over here in the book of Job, which we mentioned, which a man, you could read it. It's an interesting book. It gets a little difficult as you follow along the debates between him and his friends, but it's a long book, over 40 chapters, where you have them going back and forth with why is he suffering. And at the end of the book, what's so interesting is this is a divine book that God said we should write down. God doesn't answer. Nowhere at the end of the book does God answer, let me explain to you why I made you suffer. The end of the book sums up in these verses. It's more in detail if you read it inside, but it's all about God saying, you know what? You'll never be able to understand why I make people suffer. There's a reason to it, but there's no way you can comprehend it as a human being. And Stein, if you'd like to read.
That is counsel by words without knowledge. Gird up now your loins like a man.
Oh, you got a little cut off there. Okay, we'll get back. So Sheila, if you'd like to read.
Then the Lord answered Job from the stormy wind and said, who is this that darkens counsel by word without knowledge? Gird up now your loins like a man, for I will demand of you, and you will answer me. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Declare if you have understanding. Who determined its measures? Do you know? Or who has stretched the line upon it? Upon what? Oops. Something blocked this.
Let me scroll down a little bit.
Okay. Now, who was stretched upon the line upon what foundation fastened, or who laid its cornerstone? Have you comprehended the expanse of the earth? Declare if you know it all.
So God is telling him, you'd see it from the perspective of a creation. I'm the creator. If you would see it from me, you would understand it. You weren't around when I created the world, when I had this whole bird's eye view. How do you expect to know why I do things? So bottom line, the meaning of suffering remains a mystery. When will it all end? When the prophet says that the knowledge of God will fill the earth. When we have the Mashiach, the final redemption, then we will be able to completely understand God and know why he does it. But until then, we cannot, and it's not our task. Yes, we have answers and we have some explanations like we gave, but ultimately those are added parts to it of what the way we're supposed to cope with it, but it's not the final say. The final say is we should ask for things to be better, and we should help others when they are in pain. Let's go now to our takeaway, the key points that we'd like to discuss from the class. So going back to the original points that we mentioned, I'll just finish off with one story. There was a guy, if this would only work, if you're familiar a little bit with how synagogues work, during certain times of the year, different people get called up to the Torah, depending on what's going on in their lives. Meaning if someone's getting married, if someone's having a child, or there's a yahrzeit, a passing of a loved one. So a guy comes to a new synagogue, and he's trying to figure out why the gabbai, the guy in charge of calling people up to read the Torah, what's his system on who he calls up. This was a large synagogue, hundreds of people, and he sees the first guy he calls up from bench number 1, third person on the right side. For the second reading, he calls up a guy from the back of the synagogue, then from the right side, the left side, the front, the back, and he's trying to move around each week his seat to another place because he's trying to make up in his mind a system of who this guy calls up to the Torah, and he's trying to position himself to be in the right spot based on the algorithms that he's attempting to figure out, and he's completely lost. After a few weeks, he comes to the gabbai, he comes to the guy in charge of giving out the aliyot, to give out the Torah readings, and he says, please explain to me what is going through your mind. Who do you pick to get up to the Torah? Where do I have to sit to get called up? So the guy says, listen, you don't understand. You came here for 3 weeks to our community and you think you're going to figure this out? He said, I've been doing this for 50 years. He says, in my mind, I keep track of every single person in the community, when their parents passed away, when their grandparents passed away, who in their family is getting married, who has a birthday. He says, the first guy I call up, his wife is having birthday this week. The next guy I call up, his son is having a bar mitzvah. The third guy I call up, his daughter just got married. The fourth guy I called up because he has a passing for his grandmother. He says, so I'm jumping around the synagogue, not randomly, but because I have the bird's eye view of every person here, what exactly they need to be doing this coming week in their schedule, and I'm holding count of everything, and therefore I'm doing it the way I do it. So too with God, we can come to God with questions. Why do you do this? Why do you do that? God says, listen, how long have you been in this world for? 20 years, 50 years, 75 years? You think you're extremely intelligent? God says, I've been around here. This is what he's telling Job. I've been around in this synagogue. I've been around in this world for thousands of years. I'm holding track of everybody, their previous reincarnations of when they were in this world beforehand, when they're going to come back again, what's the world picture, how we have to do things. I can explain this all to you, but you got to come up to heaven, see things the way I do from the large perspective of thousands of years, and then you'll know exactly why everything's happening. Let's go back to our key points, which goes through the different levels of understanding that we went through. Let's start with Sheila. If you could read point number 1.
Questioning God's way comes from our faith in him, not a lack of it.
So can you just expound on that for a moment, what we mentioned in the beginning of the class regarding that point? We gave an example of like a parent. Do you get upset when a parent says something that if a stranger said you wouldn't?
No, that's the point of it, that it's the faith, and not because you don't have faith, because you do have faith. That's why you're supposed to question it and have it. If you didn't have any faith, then it wouldn't even matter.
Exactly. So it bothers us because we believe in him. And Layla, point number 2.
When things don't seem to go our way, it is helpful to remember everything God does is good.
Okay. Do you remember anything we mentioned on that switched a little bit of your perspective or enhanced it?
Mine? Or?
Yeah, you're meaning based on our class. What can you share about?
Well, yeah, it's just like a very optimistic view, and we learned about Gam Zu Tova.
Right. Very good. That's exactly by that point. We said everything that God does is for the good. We might not see it now. Now it's bad, but it's ultimately going to lead to good. That was the second point we mentioned. Now, Elia, if you'd like to read the next point, which takes it even a step further. Not just that this is bad, but it's going to lead to good, but rather...
Yeah, wait, the third one, yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Our misfortunes are actually blessings in disguise since they originate in a higher world. This one's also like kind of like the last one. Everything happens for a reason. Gamzu Tova. If something bad happens, we know that God let it happen. So it's either going to turn out good or it's going to be for a reason. and like just everything comes from God. So you just have to trust the process.
Right. Which, to add a little bit, this is, we set an additional level. Point number 3, not just that it's bad that's going to lead to good, but it itself is good, just a good that's so hidden that we cannot see. It's sort of like an X-ray. It's a light that you cannot see. There's good in the world that is above our being able to appreciate it in a revealed way. And then Sterni, if you're with us, if you can read point number 4, suffering.
Yeah, it's not coming up on my screen. Sorry, but I'll just listen.
Okay, so I'll read that for you. Suffering refines the body and lets the soul shine through. Can you add anything to that aspect? We mentioned, I'll give you a hint about a rubber band, or the lady that Dina Horowitz, where her husband has ALS.
So she said that us being in that dark pit, Hashem tries to show us what we're made of.
Right.
And I don't think,
Yep. Allows us to reach greater heights than before. Thank you. And now the next point, Sheila.
When someone else is suffering, we shouldn't try to explain away their hardship.
Yeah. So all this is good for us to work on ourselves. Never is this a way to justify other people's problems. And that's exactly why God does not tell it to us, because our job is not to be cold to someone else. And Layla, the last one.
When we see suffering, we should use our outrage to change the world. If we don't see God fixing it, we will.
Yeah. So this is the last point where God sometimes intentionally makes it difficult because he wants us to be a partner with him in this world. He says, it's not that everything is perfect. There are problems in the world, and I want you to fix it. If I don't fix it, God says, and you see the injustice, you get your shoes on and start fixing it. Get yourself involved. Don't assume that it's all perfect because God is in control. Part of God's desire was that there should be suffering and pain that's not understandable, and we as humans will come and say, God, this is not right. We need to fix it. I will go ahead and feed the poor man, even though you made him poor, you made him suffer. I will heal him. I will give him food to eat. I will allow him to excel and become a better person because I know that is what you want. You want me to get actively involved. With that, we'll conclude this class. Thank you all for joining. I think it's a really important class. And next week, we will discuss as well another important point, which is free will. With all our explanation about God and God running everything, where does our choice get involved? So we'll explain that in further detail next week. All the best. Thank you all for joining.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Have a good week.
Bye-bye. Yes, thank you. Bye-bye.
What do I need to do?